The moment I laid eyes on the Rolls-Royce Phantom at the government auction, I knew it had to be mine. Sleek black exterior gleaming under fluorescent lights, cream leather interior untouched by time, it was automotive perfection. The auctioneer called out the starting bid, and I held my breath. $10,000 for a vehicle worth $300,000. This had to be a mistake. Going once, going twice. The auctioneer scanned the room. No one moved. No one understood the opportunity before them. Sold to bidder number 47. That was me. Just like that, I became the owner of the most luxurious vehicle I had ever seen, let alone driven. The auction manager explained it had been seized in a government operation, cleaned, inspected, and cleared for legal sale. All paperwork was in order. All I needed to do was sign and drive it home. The first time I pressed the accelerator, the engine responded with a purr so smooth it felt like the car was floating above the pavement rather than touching it. The steering wheel, wrapped in hand-stitched leather, felt solid beneath my fingers. This was not just transportation. This was art in motion. I had never been the type to show off. My life had been built on hard work and careful saving. But this was different. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that had fallen into my lap. So I drove it home, savoring every mile, every turn, every moment behind that iconic steering wheel. Pulling into Oakwood Estates, our quiet suburban neighborhood with its cookie-cutter homes and perfectly trimmed lawns felt surreal. The contrast between the modest houses and my new acquisition was stark. I could feel eyes on me immediately. Curtains twitched. Gardening paused mid-hedge trim. Dog walkers stopped in their tracks. And then there was Karen. Standing at the edge of her driveway, arms crossed over her floral blouse, her silver-streaked bob unmoved by the afternoon breeze. Her eyes narrowed as I passed. Even through the tinted windows of the Phantom, I could feel the chill of her stare. Karen Williams, head of the Homeowners Association for 8 consecutive years. The unofficial neighborhood warden whose clipboard was her weapon and whose fines were her ammunition. Everyone knew her reputation. The woman who had forced the Jenkins family to repaint their house 3 times because the shade of beige was non-compliant. The one who had mandated that Christmas lights could only be white, never colored. The enforcer who measured grass height with a ruler. I had managed to stay off her radar since moving in 6 months ago. Until now. That evening, a note appeared in my mailbox. Cream-colored stationery, HOA letterhead, Karen's signature at the bottom in flowing blue ink. Dear new neighbor, on behalf of the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association, I must express concern regarding your new vehicle acquisition. While we celebrate personal success, we must remind all residents of our community aesthetic guidelines. Vehicles that draw undue attention or suggest values inconsistent with our family-oriented community may be subject to review. I would welcome a conversation at your earliest convenience. Warmest regards, Karen Williams, HOA President. I read it twice, then placed it on my kitchen counter. The implied threat was clear, but I refused to be intimidated. The car was legally mine. I had parked it in my own driveway. There was nothing she could do. How wrong I was. The next morning, I found all 4 tires mysteriously low on air. Not flat, just low enough to be concerning. My security camera had experienced a convenient power outage during the night. 2 days later, trash appeared scattered near my driveway, fast food wrappers and empty soda cans that had certainly not come from my home. When I cleaned it up, I noticed Karen watching from across the street, phone in hand, documenting my violation of neighborhood cleanliness standards. I tried to be reasonable. I tried to be patient. I told myself this was just the price of living in a controlled community with strict standards. I had no idea that I had already been marked, targeted, and scheduled for removal, all because of a car that represented everything Karen could not control. The first official HOA violation notice arrived exactly 1 week after I brought the Rolls home. It cited me for excessive automotive shine creating hazardous reflection conditions. I laughed out loud reading it. The second notice came 3 days later, non-conforming vehicle dimensions exceeding community guidelines. The third, visitor parking misuse for luxury display purposes. Each violation carried a fine, $50, $100, $250. They piled up like autumn leaves, each more absurd than the last. I called the HOA office, hoping to speak with someone reasonable. Instead, Karen herself answered, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "We have had multiple complaints from concerned neighbors," she explained. "Your vehicle represents values inconsistent with our family community." "What values would those be?" I asked. "Hard work, success." "Ostentation," she replied without hesitation. "Exhibition of wealth, it makes others uncomfortable." "It is just a car," I said. "It is a statement," she countered. "And in Oakwood Estates, we prefer our residents make statements with their flower gardens, not their imported vehicles." That was when she dropped the bomb. "If the violations and fines are not addressed within 14 days, we will be forced to consider towing as an option." I nearly dropped the phone. "You cannot tow a vehicle from a private driveway without legal cause." "Our HOA bylaws give us broad enforcement powers," she replied. "I suggest you review your homeowner agreement." I spent that night poring over the 50-page document I had signed when purchasing my home. Buried on page 43 was a clause granting the HOA emergency removal rights for vehicles causing community disruption or hazard. The definition of disruption was left deliberately vague. I decided to take my case to the monthly HOA meeting. Surely the other board members would see reason. Surely they would recognize Karen's vendetta for what it was. The community center was packed when I arrived. Karen sat at the center of the board table, flanked by 4 other members who looked like they had been selected from a catalog of suburban conformity. I signed up for the public comment period and waited my turn. When my name was called, I approached the microphone with confidence. I explained my situation calmly. I described the legal purchase, the proper paperwork, the targeted harassment I had experienced. "The vehicle in question meets all state requirements," I stated. "It is properly registered, insured, and maintained. There is no legal basis for the fines or the threats." I was halfway through my explanation when Karen leaned forward and pressed a button. The microphone went dead. The room fell silent. "I believe we have heard enough," she announced to the room. "Mr. Wilson's vehicle has become a community concern. We have received 17 complaints regarding its presence." "Who complained?" I demanded, but without the microphone, my voice sounded small in the large room. Karen smiled thinly. "Complainant privacy is protected under HOA guidelines." Then came the killing blow. "We must consider what kind of elements such vehicles attract to our community," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the room. "We do not need gang cars in our family neighborhood." Gang cars, the implication hung in the air like poison. Several people turned to stare at me with newfound suspicion. I opened my mouth to protest, but Karen had already moved on to the next agenda item. I had been dismissed. As I walked to my car after the meeting, a man approached me cautiously. I recognized him as David Chen from 2 streets over. He glanced around nervously before speaking. "She does this," he whispered. "Targets people who do not fit her vision. Last year it was the Patels with their cultural garden sculptures. Before that, the Rodriguez family with their home business. She does not stop until they leave." "Why does everyone let her get away with it?" I asked. "Fear," he replied simply. "She knows everyone's violations, real or imagined. Cross her, and suddenly you are drowning in fines." I thanked him for the warning and drove home slowly, the rolls purring beneath me. In my rearview mirror, I could see Karen's sedan following at a distance. This was not just personal anymore. This was political. I represented a challenge to her authority, a crack in her perfect community facade. That night, I awoke to the sound of splintering wood. I rushed outside to find my mailbox smashed, lying broken on the lawn. The next morning, Karen was at my door with her clipboard, citing me for improper mailbox maintenance and landscaping debris. When I mentioned the vandalism, she looked at me with mock sympathy. "Perhaps you damaged it yourself for attention. We have had cases of that before." That was the moment I knew this woman would never stop. She would use every tool at her disposal to break me, to force me out. And all because of a car that dared to be exceptional in her kingdom of beige mediocrity. What Karen did not realize was that she had just started a war with someone who had nothing to lose, and a very special car that would prove to be her undoing. 2 weeks passed in uneasy tension. The fines continued to accumulate. I consulted with a lawyer friend who advised me to document everything, install security cameras, and prepare for a potential civil suit. I followed his advice, setting up cameras around my property, visible ones to deter further vandalism. Karen responded by sending a notice citing unapproved security modifications visible from common areas. The game continued, move and countermove, like a bizarre chess match where the pieces were HOA bylaws and the prize was my sanity. Then came the day that changed everything. I had gone to work as usual, leaving the rolls in my driveway, gleaming in the morning sun. My new security system was active, cameras recording to cloud storage where Karen could not access them. When I returned home at 6:47 p.m., I turned into my street and felt my stomach drop. Even from a distance, I could see it, the empty space in my driveway. The Rolls-Royce was gone. I pulled up and sat in my car, staring at the vacant concrete. My brain struggled to process what I was seeing. Had I parked elsewhere? Impossible. Had it been stolen? In broad daylight in a gated community. With shaking hands, I called the HOA emergency line. Karen answered on the second ring, as if she had been waiting for my call. Oakwood Estates HOA, Karen speaking. My car is gone, I said without preamble. Someone has taken my Rolls-Royce. There was a pause, then a sound I will never forget, a small, satisfied chuckle. Oh yes, that vehicle. It was removed this afternoon for community safety reasons. My blood turned to ice. You towed my car from my private property without notice. Notice was provided through multiple violation citations, she replied calmly. The removal was conducted in accordance with HOA emergency protocols, Section 7, Paragraph 12. That is theft, I said, my voice rising. I will call the police. Feel free, she responded. They will refer you back to civil court for an HOA dispute. The vehicle is being held at a secure facility pending resolution of outstanding violations. Once your fines are paid in full, we can discuss its return. This is illegal, I hissed. I will sue you personally. Many have threatened that, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Our HOA is well insured against frivolous claims. Good evening, Mr. Wilson. The line went dead. I sat in my car, trembling with rage and disbelief. Then I did exactly what Karen had not expected. I called the police and reported my vehicle stolen. The HOA president claims responsibility, I told the officer who took my report. She had it towed without legal authority or proper notice. The officer sounded skeptical but took down the details. This sounds like a civil matter, sir, but we will file the report and investigate. Next, I called my attorney friend, Michael, explaining the situation in detail. His response was immediate and fierce. This is grand theft auto, plain and simple, he said. HOA or not, they cannot legally take a vehicle from private property without court order or owner consent. Karen seems to think they can, I replied. Karen is about to learn a hard lesson about actual law versus HOA bylaws, Michael promised. Document everything. I will draft an emergency injunction first thing tomorrow. That night I could not sleep. I paced my house, checking windows, half expecting to see Karen lurking in the shadows. Around midnight, my doorbell rang. It was my neighbor Thomas, looking uncomfortable on my porch. Hey, I saw what happened today, he said quietly. I have security footage from my Ring doorbell. It shows the whole thing. He handed me a USB drive. I do not want to get involved officially. Karen would make my life hell, but this is not right. I thanked him and immediately uploaded the video to my computer. The footage was crystal clear. At 2:13 p.m., a private towing company truck had pulled up to my house. The driver looked uncertain, checking paperwork. And there was Karen, standing beside him in her pressed khaki pants and floral blouse, pointing at my car, clipboard in hand. She physically directed the driver, showing him how to access the vehicle, overseeing every moment of the theft. Most damning of all, when the driver handed over a form for signature, it was Karen who signed it, not as an HOA representative, but as the vehicle owner. I forwarded the footage to Michael immediately. His response came within minutes. "This changes everything. This is not an HOA action. This is personal theft with falsified documents. We file criminal charges in the morning." For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a glimmer of hope. Karen had overplayed her hand. In her zeal to rid her perfect neighborhood of my offensive car, she had stepped far outside the boundaries of law. Even her precious HOA bylaws could not protect her now. But I had no idea that this was just the beginning, that my Rolls-Royce had secrets that would turn this suburban squabble into a federal case. With my car gone and legal proceedings in motion, I decided to gather every piece of documentation I had on the Phantom. The auction paperwork, title transfer, registration, anything that might help my case against Karen. As I reviewed the vehicle history report, something caught my eye. Before being listed at the government auction, the car had been processed through an asset forfeiture program. There was a case number listed, but minimal details. Curious, I ran a deeper search online using the case number. What I found sent a chill down my spine. The case was referenced in several news articles about a major drug trafficking bust 3 years prior. The operation had targeted a distribution network with ties to an international cartel. Among the seized assets, a black Rolls-Royce Phantom. My Rolls-Royce. I called Michael immediately. I think my car was involved in a major DEA operation. "Are you certain?" he asked. "That could complicate things." The VIN matches. The case number is linked to a huge drug bust. The previous owner is currently serving 35 years in federal prison. There was a long pause. "This changes our approach," Michael finally said. "The good news is your purchase is still completely legal. Seized assets cleared for auction are legally transferred with clean title. But what?" I pressed. "But federal agencies sometimes maintain interest in high-value assets from major cases, even after sale. They are cleared of evidence, but sometimes tagged for monitoring." "You think the DEA is tracking my car?" The idea seemed absurd. "It is possible," Michael said. "And if Karen has interfered with a vehicle of federal interest, even unknowingly." He did not need to finish the thought. This had escalated beyond a neighborhood dispute or even grand theft auto. This was potentially interfering with federal property tracking. "I have a contact at the Justice Department," Michael continued. "Let me make some calls." The next day, Michael connected me with Special Agent Daniels from the DEA's Asset Forfeiture Division. I explained my situation in detail: the auction purchase, Karen's harassment, and the eventual theft of the vehicle. "You said this HOA woman signed for the vehicle as the owner?" Agent Daniels asked, his voice sharpening with interest. "Yes, I have video evidence," I confirmed. "And she is keeping it at an undisclosed location." She referred to a secure facility, but refused to specify where. There was a pause, then the sound of typing. "Mr. Wilson, I am going to be completely transparent with you. The vehicle you purchased was indeed part of Operation Kingpin, a major narcotics case. While it was cleared for public sale, it remains on our monitoring list." "Monitoring list," I repeated. "Certain high-value assets from major trafficking organizations are flagged in our system, even after sale. It is not that we suspect new owners of anything illegal, far from it. But these vehicles sometimes retain value to former associates of the original owner." The implication was clear. My beautiful Phantom was not just a luxury car. It was a potential target for people connected to its former cartel-affiliated owner. "And now it has been taken to an unknown location by someone falsely claiming ownership," I said slowly, understanding the gravity of the situation. "Exactly," Agent Daniels replied. "This is now a matter of federal interest. Ms. Williams has not only committed grand theft auto, she has potentially interfered with a flagged asset in an ongoing investigation." "What happens now?" I asked. "We need to recover that vehicle immediately," he said. "I will have a team reach out to you within 24 hours to take your formal statement. In the meantime, do not confront this woman. Do not tell her about the DEA connection. Let her believe this is still just a neighborhood dispute." I agreed readily. For the first time since bringing home my dream car, I felt the tide turning in my favor. Karen had no idea what forces she had just set in motion. Her petty power play was about to bring the full weight of federal law enforcement down on her perfectly coiffed head. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in weeks. I dreamed of Karen's face when she realized she had not stolen a car from a neighbor she could bully. She had taken property being monitored by the Drug Enforcement Administration of the United States government. 2 days later, a nondescript sedan pulled into our neighborhood. Two men in business casual attire emerged, looking for all the world like real estate agents or insurance adjusters. They walked directly to Karen's house and rang the doorbell. I watched from my window as Karen greeted them with her practiced HOA president smile. Even from a distance, I could read her body language, the way she straightened her posture, adjusted her hair, prepared to impress these potential new residents. What happened next was related to me later by my neighbor Thomas, whose wife was walking their dog near Karen's house and overheard much of the conversation. The two men had introduced themselves as luxury car collectors interested in the neighborhood. Karen, ever eager to appear important, had invited them inside for coffee. When they expressed admiration for the properties and mentioned hearing about a beautiful Rolls-Royce in the area, Karen could not help herself. "Oh yes, that was quite a situation," she had boasted. "As HOA president, I had to take action. Some elements simply do not belong in our community." "What kind of action?" one of the men had asked innocently. "I had it removed," Karen said proudly. "Used my emergency authority to have it towed and impounded." "That sounds serious. Where is it now?" Karen had hesitated only briefly before continuing her self-aggrandizement. "Secure in my brother-in-law's storage facility. He owns Lakeview Storage on Highway 23. "May we see it?" the second man asked. "We are particularly interested in Rolls-Royces." Karen, flattered by their interest and seeing an opportunity to further showcase her authority, had agreed immediately. She drove them to the storage facility in her own car, chattering about her important role in maintaining community standards. At the storage unit, Karen proudly unlocked the door to reveal my Phantom, still gleaming despite a thin layer of dust. She ran her hand possessively along its hood. "It really is magnificent," one of the men said. "Shame about the previous owner." Karen's eyebrows had risen. "Previous owner?" "The cartel lieutenant who originally purchased it," the man replied casually, "before the DEA seized it." The blood had drained from Karen's face. "I do not know what you mean. This belongs to a resident who—" That was when both men had produced their badges. "Ms. Williams, I am Special Agent Daniels with the Drug Enforcement Administration. This is Special Agent Torres. We are here about the stolen Rolls-Royce Phantom registered to Mr. Wilson." "This is an HOA matter," Karen stammered. "We have authority to remove vehicles that violate—" "This is grand theft auto," Agent Daniels interrupted. "You signed towing documents claiming to be the vehicle owner. You directed its removal from private property without court order. And most concerning to us, you have interfered with a vehicle that remains under federal monitoring following its seizure in Operation Kingpin." "I did not know," Karen began. "Your knowledge or lack thereof regarding the vehicle's history is irrelevant to the charges," Agent Torres stated flatly. "What is relevant is that you falsified documents to steal a $300,000 vehicle." Karen's desperate attempt to backpedal was painful to hear. She tried to cite HOA bylaws. She attempted to blame the board's collective decision. She even suggested that I had abandoned the vehicle, making removal necessary. The agents were unmoved. "Ms. Williams, we are seizing this vehicle as evidence in a federal investigation," Agent Daniels announced. You will be receiving a summons to appear before a federal magistrate regarding charges of grand theft auto, falsification of documents, and impting a federal investigation. By that evening, the entire neighborhood knew. Karen, our all-powerful HOA president, had been caught red-handed by federal agents. My phantom was returned to federal custody as evidence. Karen had been left standing in the storage facility parking lot, clutching her clipboard like a shield against the collapse of her small kingdom. The neighborhood hummed with the news. People who had feared Karen for years suddenly found their voices. Stories emerged of her past tyranny, the selective enforcement, the personal vendettas, the quiet threats that had kept everyone in line. For the first time, Karen was the one being watched. Neighbors who had once averted their eyes when she passed now stared openly. The whispers she had once controlled now turned against her. And I, the target of her most ambitious attack, waited quietly for justice to run its course. The federal charges against Karen sent shockwaves through Oakwood Estates. The HOA board called an emergency meeting, desperately trying to distance themselves from her actions. They issued a formal statement claiming Karen had acted alone, without board approval. I attended that meeting, sitting silently in the back as board members fell over themselves to denounce their former leader. Several approached me afterward, offering awkward apologies for any inconvenience I had experienced. With Michael's guidance, I filed a civil suit against both Karen and the HOA for harassment, defamation, property theft, and emotional distress. The evidence was overwhelming: the falsified violations, the targeted enforcement, the mailbox vandalism captured on my neighbor's security camera, and of course, the grand theft of my vehicle. Karen's life unraveled with stunning speed. The federal charges meant she could not leave the state without court permission. Her reputation, once her greatest weapon, lay in tatters. Former board members suddenly remembered incidents where they had opposed her actions but had been overruled or intimidated into silence. Most damning of all was the testimony of Elaine Griffith, the HOA secretary for 6 years, who provided documentation of Karen's systematic targeting of residents who challenged her authority. The violations had always been manufactured for those who dared to stand out: minorities, independent thinkers, anyone who represented diversity in her carefully cultivated community. 3 weeks after the DEA's intervention, Karen called a press conference at the community center. It was painful to watch. Her once immaculate appearance had deteriorated, her hair dull, dark circles beneath her eyes, her trademark clipboard conspicuously absent. "I wish to apologize to the community," she began, voice trembling. "My actions were meant to protect our neighborhood values, but I may have been overzealous in my methods." May have been. Even now, she could not fully admit her wrongdoing. "I especially want to apologize to Mr. Wilson for any misunderstanding regarding his vehicle." Misunderstanding, as if stealing a car was a simple miscommunication. The reporters were not gentle. They pressed her on the federal charges, the pattern of discrimination, the falsified documents. When asked directly if she had stolen my car, she deflected, calling it an HOA enforcement action that may have exceeded standard protocols. Her press conference backfired spectacularly. Rather than generating sympathy, it revealed her inability to take genuine responsibility. The local newspaper ran the headline: HOA president faces federal charges after stealing luxury car with cartel connections. The narrative had shifted completely. I was no longer the ostentatious newcomer disrupting community standards. I was the victim of a power-hungry tyrant who had finally gone too far. 1 week later, at the regularly scheduled HOA meeting, I requested time to speak. The room was packed, not just with residents, but with reporters from local news outlets. The interim board president granted my request immediately, suddenly eager to appear fair and transparent. I approached the microphone calmly. I did not need notes. I had lived this story. For months, I was harassed, fined, and eventually robbed, not by criminals, but by the very person entrusted to protect our community standards, I began. My crime was owning a car that drew attention. My punishment was systematic persecution. I detailed everything: The escalating fines, the vandalism, the public humiliation at meetings, and ultimately the theft of my vehicle. This was never about community standards, I continued. This was about power and control, about forcing conformity through fear, about punishing anyone who dared to stand out or speak up. I presented evidence, emails, violation notices, security footage, witness statements, building an irrefutable case not just against Karen, but against the culture of intimidation she had created. Today, I am not asking for anything except accountability, not just from Karen Williams, but from everyone who enabled her, from those who looked away when others were targeted, from those who enforced her unjust rules because it was easier than standing up to her. The room was silent when I finished. Then, slowly, people began to applaud. It built gradually until the entire room was standing. Not for me, I realized, but for the truth finally being spoken aloud. That night, the board voted unanimously to remove Karen as HOA president. They also voted to dismiss all pending violation notices and to initiate a complete review of HOA bylaws with resident input. For the first time, people began to speak openly about their experiences. The Latino family who had been fined for having too many family members visiting on weekends. The elderly woman who had been cited for landscape violations while recovering from surgery. The black couple whose basketball hoop had been deemed inconsistent with community aesthetics. Pattern after pattern emerged, all pointing to one undeniable truth. Karen had used HOA rules to enforce not community standards, but her own biased vision of who belonged and who did not. The civil case never made it to court. The HOA's insurance company, seeing the overwhelming evidence, offered a settlement that covered all my legal fees plus substantial damages. Karen's personal liability insurance followed suit, desperate to close the matter before more damaging information became public. The federal case, however, would proceed. Karen would have her day in court, answering to charges far more serious than any HOA violation she had ever issued. Justice, it seemed, had a symmetry all its own. 6 months after Karen first noticed my Rolls-Royce Phantom in the driveway, I received a call from Agent Daniels. "Good news, Mr. Wilson. Your vehicle has been cleared as evidence and is ready for return to your custody." When I arrived at the DEA facility, I found my Phantom looking better than ever. It had been professionally detailed, its black paint restored to a mirror finish, its cream leather interior conditioned and pristine. "We take care of our evidence," Agent Daniels said with a wink, "especially the kind with 12 cylinders and a spirit of ecstasy on the hood." He handed me the keys along with a folder of documents. "The vehicle has been fully cleared from our monitoring program. No more special attention from us, though I cannot promise the same from your neighbors." I thanked him for everything. He shook my hand firmly. "People like your former HOA president, they count on others staying quiet, following along, afraid to make waves," he said. "What they never expect is someone who stands their ground." Driving the Phantom home felt like a victory lap. The engine hummed with quiet power, the steering responsive under my hands. This was not just a car anymore. It was a symbol of standing up to bullying and intimidation. When I pulled into my driveway at Oakwood Estates, the neighborhood felt different. Neighbors who had once hurried inside at the sight of me now waved or stopped to chat. Children who had been hushed when asking about my fancy car now gazed at it openly with wonder. The civil case settled in my favor with minimal fuss. The financial compensation was substantial, enough to cover all legal fees and provide a comfortable cushion besides. But more valuable was the vindication, the public record that showed I had been wronged. The HOA transformed with remarkable speed. The new board, led by my neighbor Thomas, who had provided the crucial security footage, focused on community building rather than rule enforcement. The massive binder of regulations was trimmed down to essential safety and maintenance standards. Residents were consulted on changes rather than dictated to. As for Karen, her fall was complete. Her federal case resulted in probation and community service rather than jail time, a mercy she had rarely shown others. The public humiliation proved too much for her to bear in the community she had once ruled. 3 months after her sentencing, a for sale sign appeared in front of her house. The day she moved out was quiet. No neighbors gathered to watch. No one celebrated publicly. There was a dignity in that restraint that Karen herself had never shown. I saw her just once more as her loaded moving truck prepared to depart. She stood in her empty driveway, looking somehow smaller without her clipboard and authority. Our eyes met briefly across the street. I nodded once. She did not respond, turning away to enter her car. The last rumor I heard placed her in a condominium in another state, where HOAs were less common and her history less known. I wished her neither ill nor well. Justice had been served. There was no need for further thought. One evening, about a year after this all began, I decided to take the Phantom for a sunset drive through the neighborhood. The air was warm, the sky painted in brilliant oranges and purples. I drove slowly, windows down, enjoying the perfect engineering of a vehicle built for exactly this kind of pleasure. As I passed through streets once patrolled by Karen's critical eye, I noticed the changes. Gardens had become more diverse and personal. House colors showed subtle variation. Basketball hoops stood in driveways. Children's bicycles lay on front lawns without fear of violation notices. People waved as I passed, not because they feared me or resented me, but simply as one neighbor acknowledging another. I waved back, feeling a connection to this community I had never experienced before. I parked in my driveway as the last light faded from the sky. The Phantom's engine ticked as it cooled in the evening air. I ran my hand along its flawless hood, thinking about the journey we had shared. This car had brought me more than luxury or status. It had taught me the importance of standing firm when wrongfully challenged. It had shown me that sometimes fighting back is not just about personal vindication, but about changing a broken system. Most importantly, it had revealed the community I truly lived in, not Karen's vision of conformist perfection, but a group of diverse individuals who, when freed from intimidation, could build something far more valuable than uniform lawn heights and approved paint colors. I looked up at the stars emerging in the darkening sky and smiled. Sometimes the most valuable things come in unexpected packages. Sometimes it takes a Rolls-Royce with a complicated past to show you the true nature of justice, community, and belonging. And sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys win.